Good. Hi, Laurel. I'd like everyone to
Hi, Sue.
I'd like everyone to meet Laurel Sholin. Laurel, I want to just tell you we're doing this interview, and this is for one of my classes on change leadership, and it's for the Masters in Higher Ed Administration and Leadership at Royal Roads. So I wanted to, I really appreciate that you can, you made yourself available for this. And I want to just let everybody know that Laurel Sholin is the Vice President Academic at Seneca College in Toronto. And she has many, many years of experience. And she has been, I actually think you were a chair too, were you not? But
I was a chair and a dean and an AVP.
Yes, chair, dean, AVP, and then she came to Fleming College and was there for just under 3 years as vice president academic, which is where I got to know her. And she was my supervisor and became a mentor to me. And then the president of Seneca reached out and asked her personally to come back in a VPA role. So she moved back to the city, the big city, and she's been doing great things there. So I have given Laurel the questions on leadership change, the most effective leadership change that you've been part of or led at Project, the top 2 or 3 elements that make leadership change effective. If you have a chance, and this wasn't part of it, Laurel, but was there anything that maybe was not successful in a project that
was there? Yeah.
And
sure,
then also
the problem.
The most, like, one of the key tips that you would have for me and my classmates as we think about being effective leaders through change. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So thank you, Sue, for the elements. I do want to clarify that although the president of Seneca did reach out to me to let me know that the position was available and to gauge my interest, it was a pretty rigorous competition.
Okay.
And that was really good actually learning for me, because I think the interview process does help you examine your leadership, reflect on your accomplishments, but also reflect on what it is that you need to work on. So that's a great experience, although be it a little bit stressful. So Sue, as you mentioned, I've been in academic administration for many years and have been part of many, I'm going to call them projects or change leadership initiatives, some of which have been successful and others not so much. So I'm going to start with 3 initiatives that I'm involved with now that are developing and looking very promising, because I'm very excited about them. So the first is the digital learning strategy at Seneca, and it's a collaborative effort with a lot of moving parts. As I mentioned, it's still a work in progress, but we're really beginning to see the results. And it's focused on hybrid and online, flexible delivery, open education resources, incorporating artificial intelligence, extended reality, and simulation into our curriculum, and digital tools to support digital and information literacy, and what we call the Seneca core literacies. And with this comes a whole examination of assessment. What are you assessing? Why are you assessing it? And how are you assessing it? So that's all part of this massive digital learning strategy. I need to be really clear that although I am leading it, I'm really not. There are a number of groups, including our Teaching and Learning Center, our libraries, the deans and chairs, and other groups that are leading aspects of it, really carrying it on their shoulders. And I kind of am, I'm going to say, the conductor of the orchestra, if you will, right? So we've got different groups that are doing different things, and some are much more, I'm going to say, involved, and I would say the leading face of the digital learning strategy than others. So what we're trying to do is clearly communicate the vision of the strategy and the specific elements and how they're connected to the overall strategic plan. So the challenge, of course, is using every opportunity to engage the partners, primarily faculty, and other departments such as our information technology services and marketing and communications to support us. And then, of course, finding as many opportunities for faculty, staff, and administrators to participate and see themselves in the digital learning strategy. So one of the things that we did, and we did a little bit early, is earlier than I had anticipated, was to, in September 2018, we made available the full suite of Adobe Creative Cloud tools to all faculty and students. Up to that point, you think of Adobe as being in the wheelhouse of the creatives. And I knew that if we really wanted to develop creativity, digital storytelling, digital learning, this particular suite of tools was a real enabler. And it was a lot earlier than I planned, by about a year. ITS, I negotiated a contract very aggressively at a great price, and they came to me and said, "We've got some good news. The good news is that we've nailed, the Adobe Creative Cloud for everyone." I said, "Wonderful! I can't wait to implement it in September 2019. I need a full year to get everybody on board at this stage of the project." And they said, "Well, the bad news is that it's September 2018, which gave us a very short runway." So, it was a bit shocking for people, but I decided that we would just go slow and not set expectations very high in the first year, and have people that were ready to run out ahead to go ahead and do that, and others that needed support, that we would provide that. So people smile when I say, well, this is one of my famous, or are the academic division's famous, we're building the airplane and we're taxiing down the runway at the same time, type of initiative.
I've used that one.
And so, so I always try to paint like a real picture and set expectations that, it's not going to be perfect. We're learning along the way. We're going to stumble. And I call it my 70% rule. So the whole thing is if for these change things, such as, the digital learning strategy, if you wait for everybody to be 100% or to be feeling like you're 100% prepared, you're never going to get out of the starting block. So I tend to ask the question, how comfortable are you? And are we at 70%? And if we're at 70%, we roll, and that means we roll with the punches. We improve, we continue on. I mean, I know it's a huge risk with faculty because some of whom I affectionately call our professional critics, but then you say, we're learning, so please give us your feedback. So that to me is something, I try to be as transparent as possible. We're always working on the elements of communication. I am managing expectations and trying to include the appropriate groups at the appropriate time, and being very open to making adjustments along the way, but not being, I'm going to say, so wishy-washy that people aren't clear that this is the direction that we're going, right? It may take us more time, but we're not moving backwards. We're not going backwards. So that to me is, part of managing change is that, according to Lewis's, I did it for my grad work, Lewis's theory of change, that, you've got to freeze, implement the change and then go forward. So I would say I'm freezing and saying, we're not going back, right? So let's move forward and talk about that. So that's one big one, and it's ongoing. I think the next one, and it's one that I actually started because, yeah,
just one question.
Ask a question.
When
sure.
You had faculty involved in that, right? Like we're involved.
Yes, yeah. So we involve our Educational Technology Advisory Committee, which is faculty. We have our Academic College Council, which has faculty. Okay. And of course, the faculty that are in the Teaching and Learning Center. And then it's like go out and engage.
Right. Okay.
Construct learning opportunities. So a great example is on Tuesday of study week, we had 50 faculty and staff turn out for our third Adobe Creative Jam for faculty. And so they did this on their study week. They'd already come out for Teaching and Learning Day. They came out for a full day of having fun, and in 3.5 hours creating a lesson plan using Adobe digital tools. So that's a great way of engaging, and we look to reach out to different groups.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
So I think the next project, and you'll probably smile at this one, Sue, is envisioning and implementing an integrated academic integrity program across the institution. So, in 2014, I went to the ICAA, the International Center for Academic Integrity conference, and then shortly left Seneca, but brought that thinking to Fleming, where we really started by, and again, you'll recall that it was, an academic college council that we struck. We handed over that policy rethinking to a faculty member at the time, Nick Stone, and to work with a group guided by what I'm going to say, the principles, right? But, guided by a change in principle and approach. So I know that Fleming got started in that way, in a very good way. And then, of course, it's a change initiative. It takes time. So I'm hoping that good work is continuing. So when I came back to Seneca and I said, oh, where are we on academic integrity? They kind of said nowhere. So I said, okay, well, let's kind of restart. So this involved what some might view as a really massive change to our policy, but it's really a massive change in the approach to dealing with the issue. So we've gone from rules and compliance, which is kind of like a gotcha, to a teaching and learning frame, which is very much education, right? Until we can look a student in the eye and say, sorry, you violated our policy, we'll be going forward with sanctions. Oh, and by the way, we've done absolutely everything possible to ensure that you fully understand the nuances of academic integrity, where to get help, support, etc. And we certainly weren't there at Seneca. So again, we started out by identifying and involving the appropriate groups, gaining support from the key groups. But our biggest challenge is getting faculty on board. It's happening, but there are still pockets of resistance in some areas. And so we're really working on the education aspect with faculty, helping them to understand the role that they play in supporting a culture of academic integrity, and how actually by getting on board with an education approach actually will down the road save them time, effort, and I'm going to say a lot of angst. So some of the difficult conversations are in and around faculty's perception that we're giving students a free ride, a free pass, we're lowering standards. It's too much work to redesign my assessment. So it's not without a lot of controversy. And I have to say, Amy Lynn, who's our Director of Teaching and Learning, is bearing the brunt of a lot of the challenges. I mean, I tease Amy and I say, sometimes we do some sessions together, but mostly she's out there alone. And, we kind of have to strap on our body armor, right? Because there can be a lot of resistance in some of the groups of faculty. But, if you start at principles, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are our principles? What's our grounding? I find if I put up a slide of principles and I say to faculty, which of these principles don't you agree with? most of them say, oh no, this makes perfect sense, right? Makes perfect sense. So they agree on the principles. They acknowledge that, gee, it's good that it's grounded in literature, and I know my personal perspective, as a faculty member might be, I'm on fire about this particular thing, but I have to appreciate, literature and evaluated practice. So the question is, why are you resisting?
Right.
If you agree on the principles and you get that it's grounded in literature. So it's trying to get at that particular piece, like really what is it? So
I think you've hit on something. I think you've hit on something that's interesting. In our we're actually studying, our textbook for this course is Jeffrey Buller, Changing Leadership in Higher Education.
Oh yeah.
And in chapter 6, one of the things I wrote down actually this morning was, it's not, and you seem to do it like you're not trying to necessarily hit a specific goal, but he talks about not working necessarily towards a specific goal, but rather spending time creating a culture of innovation and continuous learning. It's, it's not kind of using the big hammer. It's kind of moving people towards it. You said, you put up the policies, like there's nothing really to disagree with. And the whole 70% thing too, I found that really interesting, because it's kind of like, it's not like we have this goal and this is just the main thing, this one goal, this check box,
Right.
You're
right.
kind of setting your approach differently. It's how are we moving everybody towards that, right?
Mm-hmm. But, from a leader, part of a senior executive committee, and I have, deans and chairs and directors and, great teams of people that, support the important work, the core work of the of the college. I mean, one of the challenges as a leader is, I always say I'm in the managing expectations business. So not only do I have to manage expectations of my team in terms of, this is where we need to be. And I always say, we're in a long game. Like I'm a biologist, so I always believe very firmly in evolution and not revolution. And so that it's this incremental steps that to me is very important. However, the person that you report to may have a different sense of urgency, right? A different frame. So it's managing those expectations as a leader and, moving people along in a good way towards this change and managing the expectations of someone who has a different time frame. That's really challenging. There's no doubt about it. So when we're trying to move things forward, I always think of who's my audience, and it's you. And I always think about the faculty, but I also say it is all about the faculty, but it isn't. It's really all about the students. So whenever we think about change, I always try and anticipate. This is where my Xerox professional selling skills course that I took when I was a teenager really came in handy. It's what are the benefits and what do you think might be the objections? So I always try and anticipate what might the flashpoints be or the objections, and I come ready with evidence to address those.
That's great.
And I always call on people to be empathetic, to put themselves in, students in a student's position, or actually even faculty in a chair's position where there's so many of them and there's only one chair and they're trying to carry on an initiative and think about each other, right? I also call people on what I'm going to call the use of their over-the-top terms. So when you're involved in a change initiative, when things start to stumble, you'll hear people going, that was an unmitigated disaster, it's a crisis, right? And I always say, is it really? Is disaster really a fair way of coining that particular misstep or bump along the road?
Right.
It's not really a disaster, right? So I try and call people when I hear that language being used, saying, is it really a disaster? Or is it something that we need to address, right? Is it a problem or a gap that we need to work on?
Right.
So I guess as I'm because I know we're always I have another. I mean, I have two more that are ongoing, but I think I'll shift from that.
We actually,
so change leadership. Yeah. Sorry.
So we probably I think we've probably spent enough time. Actually, I'm looking at the clock here, but I think it's given me. I've written down some things, but there's the 70%. There's the over the top terms. There's the evolution, not revolution. And I know you used to, hard on process, soft on people. That was one of the things when you were at Fleming.
Yeah.
I see that coming out.
Yeah.
Just the last thing, Laurel. If there was one most.
You want me to talk about that hasn't been successful?
Well, I don't know whether we have. Yeah. That wasn't in the requirements, but if you have a quick one, and then your biggest tip for leaders, for my classmates and I, that are thinking of how to be an effective leader throughout change, what would be your number one tip? But if you have
so I would say recognize your role. I mean, I like to think I'm more of a servant leader. So, be humble.
Right.
You have to have your team and its expertise. So give credit, don't micromanage. Make sure that you understand that you are in the business of managing expectations, particularly of your supervisor. So that when you're rolling out these big change initiatives, particularly when they involve the academic area, that there is a way of thinking and doing that needs to be respected, and that time, you have to set reasonable timelines and make sure that those timelines honor the principles you've communicated. So, there's an old adage, and I was trying to look to see, to whom to attribute this, but it's one that's really resonated with me. And it's, if you want to go fast, you go alone. And if you want to go far, you go together. And the going together takes time, right? So when you're leading change, you have to go together. So I think the ones that have failed are the ones that have had an urgency and have not been clear. And I'm going to say unreasonable expectations in terms of what the goal might be, right?
Right.
My PhD supervisor says we need to work on good enough, not perfect.
Right. That's been so helpful. I just brings to mind how much I miss our conversations, Laura.
Well, now that we've mastered Zoom, we can have them more often.
Yes, and you know what? I sent a little WhatsApp out to my class just before this, and I said, "Wish this Luddite luck because I'm now using Zoom for the first time." So, anyways,
It works great.
it does. It does work great. And I want to just before I'm going to turn off the recording, but thanks so much
Sure.
for this. And I know my classmates and I all, are going to take a lot away from what you have said, and really appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time in your busy day.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Good.